Welcome to the Way to Go podcast. I'm Bill McMinn. Along with me is Steve Arslick, doing a podcast together on, I don't even know what I would call it, but I'll say, let's start with a quote. And this is something that I've seen on t-shirts and I've heard. Now, I'm surprised you didn't hear it actually when I ran it by you. Because I've heard it enough that I knew to Google search it. You know how like if you know enough words or something?
Remember a couple words.
Exactly, and you can kind of Google search it, or song lyrics, you know enough of it to figure it out by just putting it in Google. But here it is. I'd rather suffer in good company than live comfortably surrounded by delicate men. What do you think about that? I threw that at you and you're like, man, I never heard that phrase before.
No, I never heard it. And, having some time to think about it. I just think about some of these things about what's going on in the world. I just think we're under attack everywhere.
Right.
Whatever's going on. I think a lot of the core beliefs that I hold are, I don't mean to make it sound like, oh my gosh, we're under attack and fearful or nothing like that. But it's like, my goodness, but all the foundational things which I think we believe, are certainly being questioned. The morals of what biblical teaching are versus what the world wants to promote. Oh, I think there's definitely a clash happening for sure.
Well, I think we got to be strong.
Maybe nothing new under the sun, but it's all there. The conflicts are real.
Right. But here's a comment. I'd rather suffer in good company. I'd rather have a harder time in good company than live comfortably surrounded by delicate men. In other words, people who can't take it, people who aren't strong, people aren't making a difference, people are just content maybe to sit on their couch for their whole life. And by definition, I wanted to look up delicate to see what it was, and it says someone who's not healthy or strong becomes easily ill, far too physically delicate. They had an example of to look after his own garden, constant pain, sickly, weak, ailing, frail. And I look at that and say, yeah, I would say that, but I look at it as more than that. I look at it as people even easily offended. It's just can't say anything, can't take anything. I hear sometimes things come back to me and it's like, well, they were mad because you said that. And of course, my attitude is like, and so, yeah, I stated my opinion. Well, is that the end of the world? Is that the end of a friendship? Because you stated an opinion, so I'm just going to be easily offended, kind of like take my ball and go home. If I didn't get my way, if you didn't see it my way, I'm out of here.
Oh, I agree. I think in the marketplace of ideas in the world today, there's too many people who are way too delicate, and they can't handle honest discussion. They can't handle opposing view. They can't, you know what I mean? We don't have to agree.
Right.
I definitely think that's a definite part of, you think about this being in this delicate condition. Is that, you are pretty frail, pretty weak on it all because, man, the minute you hear something you don't like, it's like, wow. Well,
here's one word I actually put on, and I think maybe even a better word for us in our culture than delicate would just be fragile.
Fragile. Yeah.
I mean, I really do think people are fragile, and this could be men or women either way, that they're like almost like dainty in their security that any little push, oh, you don't think I should be going to that church because they don't wear masks? Oh, you're right. They're singing. And these are the kind of things I've heard people say. It's you go to a church where they actually sing. They sing songs. Isn't that spreading COVID? Which I don't know that there was ever any evidence that happened at all. But if somebody were to say, oh, you're right, I don't want you to think bad of me, I won't go. What are you worried about what other people think anyway?
Oh, right? I agree. I mean, people make their own decisions. I mean, we've gone from a persecuted church from the time of biblical times to where people were actually getting killed for meeting. And it happens in the world today that we're worried about whether or not a virus with a very low, whether or not you're going to come and be around. I mean, I think there's a level of delicacy through a delicate type of nature, this whole thing. And I think it is very much on ideological beliefs more than it is on any real thing. And I think about, even Paul's encouragement to the church, when you start thinking about this is, being watchful. 1 Corinthians 16:13 says this, be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong.
Right.
And it's taking a stand in
what
our
verse
faith.
Was that again?
1 Corinthians 16:13.
Yeah, I like that. Act like
and
men.
It's talking about, hey, when you're think all these things in the world that you're so fragile over, that you're so delicate over, that you get so easily offended. He's saying, stand firm in the faith. I mean, all these and all these kind of ideas that are being thrown out there, and I don't care, pick your topic. It's like, my goodness, come back just to the Bible.
Right.
What's the Bible teaching? Act like men. Be mature believers. And that's not just for men. This is for women too. He's talking to the church.
Right.
Go back to your faith. Act mature. How does Christ expect you to respond?
Right.
How should you love other people? And go from there.
Right. Well, I think even about the easily offended. Ecclesiastes 7:21. Do not pay attention to every word people say, or you may hear your servant cursing you. Stop paying attention to what everyone else says. You got to make decisions on your own. As a man leading my house, I can't go by the opinions of everyone else. I can't go by what everyone else thinks. I got to make decisions that are right for me. If I went by what everyone else thinks, I wouldn't be on a kayak. And I'll tell you why, because I never see anyone else out there.
Right.
I mean, I'm out there night after night after night. You see fishing boats. Like I'll see guys coming in from walleye fishing or perch fishing, whatever they're doing out there. I'll see them come in the evening as the sun is setting. Others, no. You go out to see the solar eclipse. We just had one, by the way. It was the last time it happened, Steve, in this state, in Ohio, for a sunrise solar eclipse was 1959. The time it happened before that was 1875. There's a good chance you and I won't see another one.
No.
So Jerry and I, we get out there, and Jerry goes, well, there's probably people watching in the parking lot. I'm like, there's no cars. I said, the only cars here are guys who put in for fishing. That's all they're caring about. Right now. I'm sure they watched it, probably being out there.
My wife was into it too, but I wasn't there in 1959, and I wasn't up for it then either. So it's like, that's one thing didn't really interest me, but it was there, certainly.
Right.
But yeah, I mean.
But I'm not going to go by that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to go by that. I don't care that no one else did. I'm willing to go alone and do it alone, and I don't care. Yeah, it's like, I'm happy to do it. But I've always been in this thing, especially being a pastor, where there's a lot. It's par for the course. People are going to criticize you, second guess you. That's like normal day. And so I always found a lot of value in this verse to say, don't pay attention to every word people say. I look what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 4:3. I care very little if I'm judged by you or any human court. Indeed, I don't even judge myself. My conscience is clear. Does not make me innocent. It's the Lord who judges me. I don't care. He said, I care very little if I'm judged by you or any human court. Honestly, I think this ought to be the attitude of every believer.
Yeah.
I care very little if I'm judged by you or any human court. I don't care, because if I'm doing what I think God wants me to do, I'm not really that interested in what you all think about it.
Yeah. Same book, as chapter 16, we just read that verse, as part of that being strong and acting like men is saying, hey, the world is filled with opinions. I mean, everybody's got it. They're like belly buttons, right? I've said this before. Everybody's got one.
Right.
So if I get swayed by every form of opinion out there to where it's either going to silence me, maybe I'm apathetic and won't respond to it, or, if I can't respond to that type of craziness, I got to come back to the foundation of the Word of God. What's he saying? And then Paul saying, you need to be strong here. You need to be strong here in your faith.
Right.
You need to weigh all of these things versus what the Word of God says. Because if you're behaving here, all those problems and all this exasperation out in the world, all these things would fall off the table if everybody was behaving here.
Right.
I mean, in reality, right? I don't think we would be so fragile. My goodness, the early church and what the church has had to endure in persecution, what it is enduring right now in various countries around the world, whether you're in the Middle East and some parts of Asia and all that, you literally are putting your life in your hands, and then you declare Christianity. I mean, there's genocides going on in Africa with the Muslims killing Christians. I mean, it's happening everywhere. But I think we get upset about whether or not somebody going to wear a mask.
Right.
We get upset whether or not you're going to have an event. I mean,
if you question something that you don't think is right, they freak out about that.
It's astounding.
This is probably a good analogy of what we see in our society. Years ago, I used to grow all of my plants for the garden. I had a pretty big vegetable garden, and I would grow everything by seed starting, let's say, February or March. I had grow lights down in my basement. I would take these tomatoes out one day. As it got nicer in April or May, I would start taking them outside, letting them have a little bit of real sun. Then I'd take them back in, and they were extremely protected. There's not even a whisper of a wind down there. There's not even a fan blowing. They know nothing of any harsh environment at all. And so I took these plants out one day, and it got windier than I realized. Took all the color out of them, killing them left and right, because they couldn't handle it, because I had them in such a cushy little environment, and I took them out too soon. I wasn't paying attention. It was a little bit colder. Yeah, the sun was out. It was a little bit too windy for them, and they couldn't hack it. You got a generation of people living in their bedrooms, socializing on the internet, texting people, can't even talk to you, Plus, we live in a world where we don't dare say anything that's going to hurt someone's feelings. You don't dare. I talked to one guy. I mean, there's some like big issues in our society. I was talking to one leader in our community, and he said, if I would take a stand on that issue, even though everyone thinks it's ridiculous, everyone thinks it's wrong, if I would take a stand on that issue, he said, they would hound me until I lost my job. It would be relentless because the majority of people don't want to be involved. The majority of the people just don't want the headache of it. They don't want to. They don't want to speak up because we want to protect everyone. We want to protect every crazy notion. We want to protect every obscene thing. We want to protect. It doesn't matter. We're just gonna. We don't. The overarching thing. Just love people and don't hurt anyone's feelings. And we're trying to create this bouncy house world that I think is making us weaker all the time.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think where, especially why we have to come back and look at the consistency of behaviors because the world is inconsistent in their expectations. That individual wasn't able to do things because he's on the wrong side of an ideology or he's on the wrong team. And so he's forced into silence.
Right.
You either capitulate or bend the knee or you're in trouble.
Right.
And at the same time, we can see on like one of the major news networks here recently reinstated a guy who was caught doing a perverse act on a Zoom call.
Did they really reinstate that guy?
Him, had him on a TV interviewing. He was talking about it, and go check for yourselves. I mean, it's amazing. That would not happen. It's an inconsistent following. Number one, he's openly performing a perverted act on a Zoom call in front of women.
Right.
And yet he's allowed to come back on the television, and it's all good. Not everybody would get that type of treatment. So if you were to try to base where you're supposed to go on the conditions of the world, you'd be lost. That's why we have to come back and stand
because you would be saying you're going to get a slap on the wrist if you do that.
Well, it depends on what company
you do something perverted in front of. Well, I'm saying if somebody else looking at what his example was.
Oh yeah,
obviously they didn't make an example of him.
Just about everybody, for some reason that one's okay because he follows a certain ideology. So on that, when you're consistent with their ideology, it's okay. But once you're outside of their ideology, then it's not okay.
Right.
And so if I follow the world's standards, if I follow the world's double standards, I'm never going to win.
Right.
And I won't even know where to go. I'm going to be tossed around, and I'll be so fragile and so easily offended or so worried about offending.
Right.
I could be so worried about offending, I'll be afraid to take a stand. Because if I take a stand, my gosh, they might try to cancel me.
Right.
Who's worried about that?
I think a lot lot are.
Oh, I know. I'm thinking to myself, why? Yeah. You worried about some lunatic canceling you? Who cares?
Right. Well, what is, I mean, the thing is, it's a reality, the cancel culture. And I think that you and I have talked about, I mean, we lived in it too. In other words, if we don't agree morally, and somebody's very, let's say, vocal or public of where they stand because of their support to certain things, or they're always posting their views on Facebook, and you kind of know that's totally not what you stand for, that business may in fact lose your business. So I guess you would be then kind of canceling them or just saying, I don't want to spend my dollars there. And I think that's been going on for years, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there's anything new with that. We're not saying everyone else don't go. I think the cancel culture is no one can go. No one should listen. No one can hear you. Instead of saying, leaving up the individual, you know what, I don't really feel comfortable going there. I don't really want to support that business right now. Me as an individual, I'm not asking everyone else to follow suit. I'm just saying I'm not. Cancel culture is even bigger than that. It's like no one should hear you if you don't agree with me. So it is very much a danger. But we live in this world where, in my mind, and that cancel culture is one part, but this softness that we live in, I see this with my very own eye dealing with people who cannot cope.
Oh yeah.
And they'll come up and there will be one little chair in the hallway and these people don't know what to do. And I'm saying that by way of analogy. It's like they hit a little bump in the road and I don't know what to do. And they're all freaked out about it because it didn't go perfectly smoothly, exactly the way they thought it should go. And they can't handle it where, man, that's not the world I grew up in, Steve. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not... You had to be flexible. You had to be able to adjust.
I think sometimes people, and I think that I like to say, they can't work their way out of a wet paper bag.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And it's like, geez, oh, Peach, there's some pretty concrete active steps you could take here. And again, but it's because I think, and I love social media. It's funny because it's like it really is a conflicting thing. There is almost a dichotomy there because it's like, wow, you can enjoy it. I love watching some certain things on YouTube. I've learned a lot. I mean, there's some great educational, entertaining things out there, but there's also such craziness sometimes. And it's like with Twitter was funny. The government of Nigeria banned Twitter from the country. Twitter comes out with a statement saying Twitter is a basic right for every human.
Right.
And yet they ban people. You can't make this stuff up.
It's so inconsistent.
It's so inconsistent. And I'm thinking to myself, you can't handle one, but you do it all day long. Right. I'm just thinking to myself, it's so amazing.
Yeah, I want to be clear. When Steve says he's into social media, he's probably not into the social media you think of per se. He's into Twitter and YouTube. Yeah, I'm into Facebook and Instagram. We both say I'm into social media. We are two different, we're on different platforms. Yeah. Your platforms you're into, our platforms I don't usually go to.
I think about some of it, but it can be a double-edged sword because it can go the other way. While there's some very good, useful, informative, great things out there, it can be extremely entertaining. I think about the actual time consumption that it does, or keep people in isolation. My goodness, COVID has done nothing else but drive people more to isolation, and social media helps contribute to that. So I can live in isolation and still feel like I'm totally connected with the world.
Okay, I want to make a point though here, Steve, because what you're saying here is an exact problem that needs to be overcome. You got to stop living in isolation. I've said this to people I'm very close to, actually. I would tell them, listen, some of the reasons you're having struggles right now is because you're not out around people enough. Yep. You're so isolated, so insulated from normal things that we would encounter things on the road. We encounter things in life. I encounter difficulties all the time because I'm not huge difficulties, just out in living, little things you have to overcome and you're kind of used to it. Oh, something fell out or I need to tie that down or whatever it is, you're used to it. These people that aren't used to it because they don't try anything, don't even know how to handle it. And it's getting worse. And that's what I see in this world. You can't be offended. People leaving as soon as they're inconvenienced. Nope, I'm not going to wait in that line. That's too big. I see people panicking over stuff that you don't need to be panicking about. I've seen people I walked into, and it was only probably a month and a half ago. I walked into an ice cream parlor before the mask mandate was lifted, a month ahead. I'm telling you what, those people looked like they were scared to death because there's this maskless guy that wants to order ice cream. I was going to leave right away. They freaked out about it. They couldn't even handle it that some guy's in here without a mask. What do I do? And this is the kind of stuff I've seen all the time. I've seen people easily irritated, negative, walk away when you should be standing in instead of backing down. It's just okay, we're just backing down. Well, why do you need to back? Sometimes you shouldn't back down because your position was moral, your position was right and wrong, and it's not like you said ideology. Although I think with ideology, if you're a conservative versus a liberal could say the daytime is dark and every liberal would agree, and the Republicans could say nighttime is day and every conservative would agree. And that's where I think it's wrong. I think it's guys, you got to think independently and stop thinking just party and start looking at the world. Are certain things right or are they wrong? It doesn't matter what your party is. Right. It's just there should be standards.
But I don't even think there is no room for debate. And I think the other thing, too, is sometimes where we have to come back and standing firm in our faith is being back in good company, is realizing the Word of God isn't my opinion. And so what I hold to isn't Steve's moral standard. What I hold to isn't Steve's opinion.
Right.
What I'm holding to is what God said.
Right.
And so I have to conform my opinions to God's standards. If my opinions are off, who has to change? Not God. And that's why I think where it comes back to a little bit too is saying, wait a minute, you could have all this thought process, but I better come back and check it and see what God thinks.
Right. I agree.
And I don't know, if, like I said, I think if we were all living here where God wanted it, a lot of this stuff goes away. If we were out there, personal responsibility. I think the Bible is very big on personal responsibility. Nobody has personal responsibility. If you're a racist, stop being a racist. If you're a bigot, stop being a bigot. If you're this or that, stop doing those things that God would say don't do. It's pretty simple. If you're living a way, don't be immoral. Don't be sexually immoral. Okay. Don't be a drunkard. Okay.
Right.
And then maybe you start living in those standards, and all of a sudden, now what you think is okay.
And you're allowed to say it. I mean, in our church, we preach against
you're okay to say it.
The whole range of sins the Bible talks about. I always say I'm an equal opportunity offender. So I'm willing to say it, whatever it is. And you have to wrestle that through. And I've talked to different people. I'm like, look, just like I have to wrestle through my issues and read scripture and wrestle through, like you're saying, they have to wrestle it through. But I think we want to make it in a world where there is no sin. We want to make a world where no one does anything wrong. We want to make a world that's only about love. It's very unrealistic. We don't have a very tough society as far as I'm concerned. We have a society, as I talked to to one doctor, and he even felt that. Now, this was a doctor told me this. Okay, so I don't want to hear what you think. You know, or you get upset because I'm talking about a doctor said. A doctor said he didn't like the mask, and he said the only reason that the government was asking us to wear a mask, he said, is because that's how weak our nation is. He said because we needed a placebo to make us feel good enough to get out the door and get to work. And if they didn't do something to make us feel good about getting out, he thought that we're so fragile psychologically that we couldn't handle it. And I thought that was interesting perception from a guy who works in a very, I would say, tense environment, because he's an ER doctor. They're going to see all kinds of stuff. He's got to handle all kinds of stuff. And he's talking about how fragile this country is.
Well, yeah,
and I think it is. And I just want to make sure I'm not. You know, I'm not here to pick on the rest of the country. Here's what I want for me. I don't want to be the frog in boiling water. Steve, I don't want to be the person who I've become fragile. You know what I'm saying? I've become the person everyone's got to walk around on eggshells because I might break. You know what I mean? I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the person that has to worry about what everyone else thinks or a person who's not willing to contact someone and say, hey, listen, I'm not in agreement with this. You know, this is something I think is wrong, and just state your case, or not afraid to bring it up to somebody and say, hey, what do you guys think about this, and bring it to light. I don't want to be so fragile and worried about everyone else. And my goodness, Steve, if we keep going by this, we're not going to be able to say a word. Like you and I'll be afraid to even give an opinion to a friend. We're going to be around our friends and keep our mouths totally shut because we're going to be so afraid they're going to be offended.
And that's why we have to stand firm in our faith and act like men, and just say we're going to take these stands. And the thing is that I would encourage people is we got to be like the Bereans. If you don't take my word for it. Get out there and search the scriptures yourself. What does God really say? Verify what's being talked about.
I agree.
And I think about, Dr. Fauci in the very first part of this thing said, the micron size of the virus is so small that the micron filtration abilities of the mask is insufficient. Don't worry about wearing it. So all of a sudden he's wearing two masks. You can't get truth in the world. But you can get truth. You can get objective truth from the Bible. And now you can go back and check everything against it. And that's what the Bereans did. That's how they came to believe. So I think about all the intelligent people who go out there. Think for yourselves, think independently, stand strong in your faith, act like men, stop listening to the craziness of the world.
No, I agree with that. And I think, like you said, go to the Bible, be strong, be there for your family, be there for your wife. Don't have to be dependent on everyone else. Now, certain things I don't know how to do, my friends will come help me do. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think there's got to be
company.
Right, be in good company. Right,
but we got to be able to stand against heresy too, and forget I think there's a lot of heresy going on in our county right now that we need as Christians need to stand firm on.
Right, I agree.
There are some heretical teachings going on. People under false leaders, false teachers.
Right.
And they're given a voice.
Right.
And that is dangerous. And if the church doesn't stand firm in faith in there, come back to the Bible. You better come back to the Bible. And they would not want that debate because they will lose.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. It's an ideology that seems to be winning.
Right.
And I love that verse in Daniel. It says, you know what? Just when it seems that evil is winning, the Ancient of Days appeared.
Yeah, and there you go. Exactly. Well, I feel this way too. I'm not going to be so fragile myself or so delicate that I can't be in the minority. I can exist in the minority. I can exist in a place where not many people agree with me. I don't care. I know what God says. I know what the Bible teaches. I'm going to stand right there, and I'm going to let the chips fall where they may, and hopefully you will too. You guys all have a great week. We appreciate you listening to the podcast. Feel free to share it with your friends, and I'll let them know about it too. God bless.